I hadn't had sales experience. I had Jesus experience. We go from zero to hitting $347,000 cash in a single month. I had two really distinct mentors, Sam Ovens and Alex Hormozi. Taking advice from a billionaire should come with a huge grain of salt. This might work for them. Let me find out how it'll work for me.
No hustle, worship here, we're a different breed. Action is what we got if action is what you need. Content capitalist, we're breaking the mold. Cause the old ways fade, new stories to be told. So content capitalist, get to the prize.
This is the Content Capitalist Podcast, and my name is Ken Okazaki. There are as many ways to make money with content as there are people doing it. So listen in as my clients, past, present, and future, unpack how they crack the code to making $1 million a year or more while capitalizing on their content. Let's get started. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Content Capitalist Podcast, where I have conversations with people who are creating content and also using it to leverage their business doing 7 figures or more. Now, I've got a guest with me who, if I'm honest, I almost started sounding desperate the amount of times I said, you got to get on the pod. And I had to chase him because here's the thing. A lot of people, they have their content and everything in such a way so that whenever there's an availability, they just go and do it. He's the kind of person who's got his priorities. And then if it fits within his predetermined schedule, then I get to come in. So I had to wait in line for quite a bit, but I was patient and here we are. Please welcome Dan Bolton to the show.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. And sorry for blowing you off for so long, dude. Nothing personal. I'm figuring out my life as we'll find on this conversation. But I'm really excited for this, man. And long time listener, first time caller. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Dan, could you, for the sake of the listeners, give us an overview of who you help, what you help them accomplish, and what's kind of what is your business?
Yeah, so I primarily work with coaches and consultants, right? And I'm sure that kind of aligns with a lot of the people that you've interviewed in the past. One of the things that I've realized is that oftentimes those titles don't even really fit a lot of the people that I work with. You know, we all remember the purple business Bible being dropped 2021, $100 million offers. And so now you have coaches offering done-for-you services. You've got agencies that are also selling education. And so these lines are more blurred than ever. And so really who I help is, I kind of just call them value creators, right? People that are in the business of creating and selling value. And I work with people a couple of different ways, right? I have a community that requires not a whole lot of me, and it's really based around kind of curriculum and community and events and things like that. And then I do a handful of kind of one-to-one mentorships and coaching and consulting that kind of keeps me sharp and has me working with kind of 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs that are looking to either refine their client acquisition or their client success systems. I've kind of built a bit of a broad range of skills over the last few years. And so, yeah, there's a range of kind of day to day. I create content. I shoot videos like this. I jump on calls. I help people from a high level. I don't have a team. I don't manage a whole lot of stuff. I minimize a lot of those kind of stresses that don't really fit my personality. And so, yeah, I basically just get paid to talk, and that's basically it. Talk and think.
Have you ever heard of someone named Tim Ferriss?
Yeah, of course.
I don't know if I'm going to be the first one to say this, but you remind me of Tim Ferriss.
I take that as a huge
Have you been told that?
Never. But I've
here's
listened to him for a long time.
When he put that book out, right, he just broke a lot of myths, like the statement 4-hour work week, and then just sharing things from not necessarily like the in the weeds so much, even though he did some of that, but a meta perspective on, hey, what if you could hold 2 or 3 or 4 jobs down and still only work 4 hours a week by leveraging this? Mm-hmm. And you're coming at it like, hey, what if you don't have to have a team? Mm-hmm. What if you don't have to spend this many hours? You're talking about how many hours you spend, how much you, the smaller groups you have that are profiting massively. Mm-hmm. And that kind of meta shift in the way to look at agency work and coaching work and the way you're sharing your ideas reminds me of him. Are you seeing a parallel at all?
Yeah, I mean, he's someone that I first read 4-Hour Workweek maybe a year after it came out. So I think that might have been 2009, 2010, then read 4-Hour Body. And one of the things that I really like about Tim and people like Naval Ravikant and just others that seem to be quite different in the way that they think is it's quite contrarian thinking. And I would say that's not naturally how I think. I think for a long time, I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I was buying the courses and working with the mentors and copying the business model and kind of just implementing exactly as I saw fit. But the more that I went down that path, the more I realized it just didn't fit me as a person. It didn't fit my personality, my skills, my goals. And so the longer I've been doing this, the more I've evolved into, I guess, what could be described as a contrarian thinking, someone that is maybe a bit of a misfit of the industry where everyone is saying like, go this way. I'm kind of going this way. And so then my work is also speaking to those people that might not fit the mold the way that most people could.
Got it. Now, I want to take our listeners back a little bit to, I know that you were a pastor at one point, right?
Yeah.
Which is not quite the typical entrepreneur path.
No.
But tell me about what you're doing there and then why you decided to shift and go all in and say, hey, I'm a businessman, I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So for those of you that can pick up the accent, I think I've got a pretty hybrid accent at this point, having lived kind of all over the world. But I'm from New Zealand. So grew up in a single parent household, got into drugs and drinking and all sorts of stuff through older siblings that were involved in all sorts of underground activities when I was 10, 11, and 12. And then when I was 13, I walked into a church from the invitation of a really pretty neighbor that I liked. And that kind of set a really strong trajectory for my life. I became a follower of Jesus at that point and went into high school. And, school was a really interesting one where it was something that I could succeed at if I tried. I was the kid with potential that didn't apply it. And I really didn't like the rules. I didn't like the uniforms. I didn't like having to be at certain places at certain times. And I was obsessed in that area of my life with music. And so that was all I really cared about. So at 16, as soon as I could drop out of school, I did drop out of school, and I was heavily involved with the church. And when I was 18, so in 2008, I had this conversation with the pastor that I was kind of a part of the church of, and he was having this conversation of, Dan, we're looking for a youth pastor. Do you happen to know anybody? And at that point, as passionate as I was about, helping people, I thought my life was really about service. That idea sounded like hell. Like I was like, I'm 18, all my friends are going to university and college and having a lot of fun. And I was like, if I think of anyone, I'll let you know. But kind of long story short there, it felt so intuitively right. And when I started dating my wife when I was 18, we've been married for 11 years. The first conversation I had with her is I was like, hey, I'm going to be doing this youth pastor thing for at least 5 years, which as an 18-year-old, that was a timeline that I felt committed to. But the average lifespan of a youth pastor is about 18 months. And so 5 years felt like a lifetime, both because of my age and because of the stage. And over the next 9 years, we were a part of this church in New Zealand. When I started with it, there was about 50 people on a Sunday. When I finished, there was about 1,500. And I was overseeing about 700 people by the end of my time in 2018. And throughout that period, I had not had any business experience. I hadn't had sales experience. I had Jesus experience. That was all I had. I was like working in churches and kind of doing all that thing. But all the way through, I was probably what I describe as like a closet entrepreneur. So when I should have been reading all these books around spiritual development and how to be a better church leader, I was looking up like how to make money online. And even though I'd never done it, that was something that was so interesting and fascinating to me. All my Kindle was just business books. It was Jeff Walker's product launch formula, but I had no product and I had no plan to launch one, but I was fascinated with this idea. So coming into 2018, we intuitively felt like it was time to finish up in the role that we had. And it was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made, because at that point in my life, I thought I would be a pastor and it would look like this for the rest of my life. I had resigned myself to never running a business. I had resigned myself to never really stepping out of that kind of church environment. But in 2018, it felt really clear like that was the right thing to do. And for anyone who remembers that period, there was one theme that was popping off in the internet marketing industry. If you opened your Facebook account, there were ads for this thing called social media marketing. And so when it came to the end of my time as a pastor, I remember finishing up on a Sunday, right? And having the kind of big celebration of like Dan and Olivia, my wife, we've done 9 years together. Congratulations, run the race well, all that. And then the next day I wake up and I have got 1 more week's worth of pay coming in that Thursday, and I had no money in the bank. And I didn't even
tell me how much you were making at the time?
Oh, dude, if we're talking US dollars, because I think that will be the most relatable currency, I was making about $17 an hour, right? And that's actually that's not true, because I was working more hours than I was paid. So if you divide the actual amount of hours I was working and the amount I was paid, it was probably about $13 an hour. And keep in mind,
and what did that come to, like month on month?
It was about in US dollars, probably about 33,000 a year, right? And I was hustling for that 33 grand, man. I was like working hard, and New Zealand tax isn't great. And so anyway, we had no money, dude. And so I woke up on that Monday. I didn't even own a laptop. I had to borrow my wife's laptop. I went to this cafe that I frequented called Mixture. And I sat down and I said, right, I have to figure out how to start a business, because I feel pretty unemployable, right? I've got no degrees, no studies. I dropped out of high school when I was 16, and all I've done is being a pastor. And so around that time, I bought Sam Ovens Consulting Accelerator and Ty Lopez's social media marketing agency. And so my first month, I did everything for everyone. Thankfully, I'd built up a great reputation in my community. So there were people that were like willing to give youth pastor Dan a shot at this new venture he was doing. So my first 5 clients was like, I was coaching a real estate agent on how to get leads online. And I was just taking the skills that I'd built in speaking over 500 times on stage as a pastor and figuring out how to help people package business messages for online. The skills were actually really transferable. My second client was a personal trainer looking to use social media. I was working with a vehicle financing place, running ads for them. I was working with a building company, creating a website for them. And then I was managing social media for my local grocery store. And so that was my first 30 days in business, was just like chaos.
Your client list sounds like the Village People.
Dude, I was
that band.
yeah. And it was an amazing season because I built so many skills, but it was also a season of so many failures and mistakes. So I'd promise the world and then have to figure out how to do it. Like, I'll never forget bringing on my first ads agency client, and I signed them. They said yes. They wired the money through, and then we had to get ads up live, and I had no idea how to run ads. So I spent all night going through Sam Ovens Consulting Accelerator, all the modules on how to create Facebook ads. And I remember going to bed at about 5:30, pressing live on the ads that I just created in that moment, and then waking up a few hours later and seeing that the leads were starting to come in. And I was like so pumped, because I was like, oh my gosh, this thing might actually work. And so I was always one step ahead of myself. I was like selling stuff that I then had to figure out how to deliver. I was like, if I have access to the modules within Ty's program and Sam's program, I'll sell it, and then I'll figure out how to deliver it based on what they tell me to do. So rather than me having all the answers and all the game plan, I was like selling it and then trying to figure out how to build it. And so that was kind of how it started. And then over the last 5 years, I've had stacks of iterations that we can kind of dig into as much or as little as you like, but that's how I got started.
I love it. Thanks for the backstory. Now, a couple things I wanted that piqued my curiosity, so the listeners might also be curious. You said that you grew up with single parent family, and you had some siblings. You were doing all kinds of bad stuff. Was there ever a point where you like got in trouble with the law, or what was the point where it's like a breaking point that was just like, if this doesn't stop, I'm going to be dead? And then you kind of shifted things.
That's a great question. So the only story of running into the law, which is a funny note, was many years later when I was no longer drinking and doing drugs. I actually smoked a lot of weed and drank a lot when I was 10, 11, 12. I started going to church when I was 13. And
How do you get access to that at 10, 11, 12?
So my family is interesting, right? Like my brother, even to this day, I love my brother. We don't have a fantastic relationship by any means, but he is the leader of the biggest gang in our city at home. And so both of my older siblings, we have different fathers. And so they are 15 years older than me. So when I was 10, they were 25, and they were involved in gangs and kind of in and out of jail and things like that. And so the only relationship we had was one based around whatever activities they were up to. And so, and then through them, I was also connecting with their friends. I was hanging out with people constantly that were 10, 15, 20 years older than me. I remember being, for anyone who's as old as I am and older, you'll remember the Y2K bug, right? That happened at the millennia, the turn of the century, right? So year 2000, I remember spending my New Year's Eve just vomiting up bourbon and cola into a toilet when I was 10 years old, because I was just surrounded by family members and people that were so much older than me and on a completely different path. And so there was a really significant moment when a family member gives me the biggest bag of weed I've ever seen in my life. And it's like their gift to me. And I'm 12 years old at the time. And I get involved in this church thing, and I really quickly understand there are two paths, maybe two paths for every person, right? There's obviously lots of decisions we can make that takes us down like little narrow paths, but there are two ways that we can live our life. Are we going to live by the desires that we have, the stuff that feels good in the moment, the stuff that we really don't consider the long-term consequences for? Or are we going to live by principles and intention and consciously create the life that we want to live? And so I'll never forget getting involved in this church and realizing that this big bag of weed that I've just been given is a decision point in my life. I either keep it, I smoke it, I do something with it, I sell it, whatever, or I get rid of it. And I remember the moment giving that back being one of the most defining moments of my life. It actually fractured that relationship I had with that person for the next decade. But as a 12-year-old, I realized that that was a decision point that I had to choose. It wasn't about the weed or not. It was about the path I was choosing to go on. And I think my life has been filled with lots of those different decisions, but that's just one really strong picture of kind of the decisions I had to make over the coming decades of being exposed to all of these things with my family and going, am I going to walk that path or am I going to create a new path for myself?
Thanks for explaining that so well. I can see how at that young age, you're still, the neuroplasticity is there. Formative age, you made a big decision that had to do with connections, love, family, acceptance, and the thing that you wanted to do. That I can see how that pattern plays over and over when you shift lanes in your life since then.
Yeah, 100%.
Second question that comes to mind is when you joined the church and then became a youth pastor, and then now what you're doing here. Was there like a shift in like a religious principle? Like, did you become very religious, and how much of that is carrying on to today?
Yeah.
As far as your beliefs, your religion, and your faith?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's evolved as we evolve, right? It's like as I grow older, like my
I just want to clarify, because when you went back and kind of talked about it, you described it more as a job in your words. So I'm just trying to get clear.
That's
like,
a great
was
question.
it a religion or a job or a blend?
So I'm a follower of Jesus to this day, right? So my faith is a core part of who I am, and it's been a core part of who I am since I was 13. When I was in this church, it evolved so drastically in terms of what it felt like and what it required of me as a job, right? Because it is this tension of like, you're doing it for people. We believe we're doing it in service to God, but there's a job element. You have a boss, there are meetings, there are goals, there's a culture. And so the church that I joined and the church that it became was just two really radically different things. And it became a big tension for me because just like anything, you can forget the reason of why you're doing it in the first place, right? You start a business to help people. All of a sudden you build a team. All of a sudden you need to make more money to like make sure that team is paid, and then you need to make sure you've got profit. And so all of a sudden the mission and the vision of why you started something actually gets lost in the doing of that thing. And so for me, my faith and my belief didn't change so much as the expression of how I saw that being played out for myself. And so I really, over the years, started to feel less and less connected with what I was doing because it felt less of the expression of why I felt like I was put on this earth, and the church was going in a different direction and had a different vision. So it was less of a breakup of I'm leaving because I disagree or because I don't believe these things anymore. It was more, I felt like a misfit, right? Much of how I did in the last few years with the business space of like, I did all the stuff I was told to do. I followed the mentors. I followed the traditional path. And I just realized that wasn't for me, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. That makes so much sense. Now I could go on forever and talk like this forever, but we've got a time constraint. So what I want to do is, could you give us just some highlights of what are the kind of distinctive iterations that you've seen yourself go through up until what you're doing now? And then after that, we'll dive into like what's working right now.
Perfect.
And how did you come to that?
Yeah, so there have definitely been distinct evolutions. So I'll quickly go over them. So April 2018, I start this business. I have a wide range of clients. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just building skills. That season, really that year of 2018 was everything for everyone, right? I didn't have a clear marketing message. I didn't have a clear offer. It was kind of like within the realm of digital marketing and social media marketing, that was kind of where I was playing. I had some coaching clients, had some clients I was doing the service for. And then what happened over that year was all of these people that had grown up with me and known me as Dan, the youth pastor, were now asking me, how are you making money online? And so that's maybe how all good guru stories start. People ask the question of like, you're doing this thing, how does it work? And so I did what most gurus do, right? And I'm not by no means calling myself a guru, more just the funny kind of parallels. I launched a course, a 997, right, in December of 2018 called the 6-Figure Side Hustle, how to make 6 figures running simple ads for local businesses. I was just teaching what I've been doing. So I spent the next few months just doing that. And that was such a formative time because there were absolutely parts of that business that I hated. Like I was working with complete beginners. It was so much harder than I ever thought. And I was only charging $1,000 for it. So the margins were really low. But it was at that time that I developed the 2 systems that I still use to this day. One was creating content and community to build trust with people, and then using the DMs to close deals. Right. So all of those $1,000 programs for me were being sold from an ad that went to a Facebook group where people watched trainings and built trust and then sent me messages to where I then closed them in the DMs. That was a really tumultuous season because, long story short, our family moved 2 countries in 16 weeks due to some mental health things that basically we moved country. It wasn't the right fit. We moved back. And the thing I was craving was like consistency of revenue. I was selling these $1,000 things and there was no recurring revenue. So in mid-2019, I restart the agency, but instead of doing everything for everyone, we became incredibly focused through one type of person and one type of problem. So at that point, we launched in June 2019. We were kind of agency 2.0, starting from scratch. And I was now running ads for coaches who wanted more calls, and we were using webinar funnels. And it was around that time I started working more with our good friend Taki more. And so our business grew radically through referrals and organic because we were just focused in on this one thing. We didn't work with e-com brands or building businesses. We were only helping coaches get more calls through webinar funnels. So we went from 0 to 100K a month with that in 9 months. And it was really radical growth. And I was working for Taki for a good portion of that. And so I was working 3 to 4 days a week for him. And then I was working 1 to 2 days in my own business doing 100K a month. And there's this amazing guy called Alex Sharfin. And so enter into 2020. This is just before kind of the world melts down and goes crazy. And I reach out to Alex and I say, hey, dude, so I'm really stressed. I'm really overwhelmed. I'm drinking a lot. I'm just wondering if you can like give me some tips to like handle my stress better. And he kind of like leans in. He's like, hey, Dan, you have a full-time job and a 7-figure business. Pick one. And I was like, okay.
Was this in person or did you call him?
It was multiple conversations. One was in person and one was via Voxer where he was just way more direct about it, right? Because he was trying to help me. He's like, yeah, you should have a morning routine, prioritize hydration, da-da-da. And then he just gets a number of these messages from me that he was like, dude, you're just being an idiot right now. You have $1 million business and a full-time job. You need to decide which path you're going to go down. And so I doubled down on the agency. I finished up with Taki. It was an amazing season. I learned so much. Go all in on my own business. And then agency's going really well. Then COVID happens. We navigate COVID. We bring our clients through that. Our agency is stronger than ever. And then in June of 2020, our agency gets hacked. Some guy from Vietnam finds a way to get through one of our employees' profiles and gets access to all of our client ad accounts. And we had to laugh at the time because it was like so traumatic. But the funniest thing was he was spending thousands of dollars of our clients' money on promoting fake Calvin Kleins in Vietnam. So it was just like there was a funny element to it where I was like, man, I have to see like the not the bright side of this, but it was just so devastating at the time. But that was just a hilarious element to it. And so over the next 30 days between ad spend we had to refund people, clients leaving because their ad accounts were shut down, and then us having to credit our clients' billing cycles while we waited for ad accounts to get back up. It cost us $100,000 cash. And that was a really big turning point for me because it wasn't about a bump in the road to the business that I wanted to build. It was me really realizing this was not a business I wanted to build. I'm a coach and a mentor and a creator at heart. And yet here I was spending all day in meetings, building things, doing things for people. And it was me and them and Zucks in this like kind of three-way relationship, right? And so I realized at that point I didn't want to do that. So I launched a coaching program teaching people how to do what we've been doing for ads agencies. In our ads agency. And the program was really simple. It was called the Run Ads Make Money Club, right? So literally it was like, hey, we're going to teach you how to do what we do. And long story short, that goes through multiple iterations over the next 18 months. But in 16 months, we go from zero with that to hitting $347,000 cash in a single month. So we grew really fast. I went from like a team of 3 to a team of 13. And this was a huge turning point for me that basically summarizes the last 18 months. Around that time, I had 2 really, really distinct mentors, right? And there'll be names that will be familiar to every person listening to this: Sam Ovens and Alex Hormozi. And I love Sam and Alex so much. I've been able to get to know both of them personally. They're incredible humans. They're also very different to me. And what I was doing at that time was I was doing what I thought I had to do to build a significant business and have the impact and make the profit that I wanted to have. So I was just following the playbook that I was given. And so around that time, both of them thought making content was stupid, which I find hilarious now. You look at someone like Hormozi, content is like the thing he's becoming most well known for, but most people don't know. 2 years ago, he had no intention of creating content. Everything for him was just like ads, acquisition,
He used to diss
sales
it
teams.
quite a bit.
100%, right? And so for me, I was following the same playbook. I was like creating the least amount of content I humanly could to build this business based on the models that I was given. And so I remember the lowest moment for me was this one particular day where I'd just been on back to back to back to back calls, right? Sales calls, team calls, client calls. And I remember this one moment that was the epitome of this low moment of business where on the outside, I was getting awards, I was getting recognition, I was making all this money. But I remember on this one particular day, I am so desperate to go to the bathroom that during a Zoom meeting, I discreetly pee into a bottle, right? Because I have no idea how to get out of these Zoom calls, because that was like literally one Zoom call would end, the next one would start, and so on and so forth. And I remember that moment was just like, man, I am not running the business that I want to run right now. And so the last 18 months for me has been around really trying to redesign things. And so in 2021, we did 2 million in revenue with a team of 13. Lots of ads, lots of client acquisition. In 2022, I redesigned everything to be about retention. So rather than just getting clients, right, how do we make an offer so good people would feel stupid to say no? It became about how do we create an offer so good people would feel stupid to leave? And so the craziest thing happened. 2021, 2 million, team of 13. 2022, team of 4, 2 million. And we turned off all acquisition for 7 months. No ads, no content, no setters, no closers, nothing. And all of these lessons were coming to me where I was like, man, I'm doing the opposite to what I was doing. I'm making more money, more profit, having more fun. And I feel like I'm kind of on the right path, but it still wasn't right. And so even coming into this year, I reduced everything down to me and a virtual assistant. And then this year we're on track to, with my awesome tax situation that I've set up, living in Bali and different things like that, I'm on track to take home $1 million, but with a team of 2 and working about 3 to 4 hours a day on average. And so the last few years has just been this iteration of how do I make the business model that is built around my life rather than building my life around my business. And what that's led me to is really rethinking a lot of the things that I was taught, not throwing everything out, but adjusting it and adapting it for my goals and my personality. And so that kind of brings me to a point now where it's like, I make really good money. I work relatively very few hours. And now I'm just doing the stuff that I love doing, which is not building teams and increasing scale and doing all these different things, but it's just focusing on the essential few things that bring the biggest return on my time and energy.
If I'm, as you're describing this, I'm kind of thinking like, if I were to make an infographic of this, then there will be like, you drunk and high as a kid. And then there's going to be this elbow point where there's a bag of weed, and then there's the church, right? Boom, there's a turning point. And then there's going to be like, hey, my family's growing. I need more money. Online marketing. There's going to be like internet marketing logo there with a dollar mark. Ding. And then the conversation with Alex, pick one, boom. Yeah. And then ping in a bottle. Boom, right? So then there's, and then I'd make little drawings on these, and then that would be like your elbow points in your life. So that's great how you explain those pivotal moments. Gosh, there's what I'm really curious about is at what point did you go all in with content creation and decide like this is actually going to be a part of what I do regularly,
Yeah.
regardless of what what version of myself I'm going through, or did you ever make that decision?
100% I did. So in 2021, when we were growing a lot, I was still creating content, but it was all with a means to an end, right? So every piece of content I created was just about building enough trust to get a call booked so we could have an opportunity to sell someone to our program. So it was a means to an end. It was not, there was no plan around like I'm creating content to build a brand or build an audience. It was like, how do I create the least amount of content, right? And at that point, I was so stressed, I thought I hated creating content. So it was minimum standard, right? I was trying to find the absolute minimum effective dose. Coming into end of last year, end of 2022, I started rethinking a lot of my business model based on my personality. And a great life is just made up of a lot of great days, right? Oftentimes we disconnect these things between the macro and the micro. We're trying to build a great business and then we're trying to build an amazing life, but we don't understand the direct connection to we wake up today and are the things we're doing actually moving us towards that because we love what we're doing day to day to day. And so growing up, I mentioned that I was obsessed with making music. Like I'm an artist at heart. I really love creating things. And what I realized was I had built a business that required me to be a builder, to manage people, to lead people, and to have most of my time associated with meetings and systems and projects rather than do what I do best, which is just creating stuff, thinking, coaching people. So the start of this year, I really had a line in the sand moment where two things happened. The first was I simplified my business model so that making money became way easier. I eliminated my team, my margins went way up, and I basically put myself back in the coaching seat of like, instead of this leveraged group coaching program, I'm going to sell more one-to-one coaching. So what that did was it blew up. I got like 30 one-to-one coaching clients in about 60 days, which took me to $100,000 profit, purely one-to-one coaching in about 8 hours a week. The second thing that it allowed me to do was think longer term, right? So it was no longer about I need to create a piece of content today to get a call or a lead or a client. It was now about where am I trying to take myself and this business and my kind of mission on the next 5 to 10 years. And that was the point that I really started to create content. And so, I launched like a YouTube channel, for example, a few months ago. And
I love your YouTube channel, by the way.
I appreciate it.
I know it's just
so
the beginning.
Fun.
I know it's just the beginning, but it's going to go places.
I'm really excited about it. Firstly, I love doing it. It's not a chore. Like now that I have less stress, I've got more creative energy. And so creating content is really fun. But I started thinking about
and
that
what's
kind
funny,
of content.
when we started this,
There you go.
When we started this call, I'm seeing you here. I'm just like, I feel like I'm watching you on YouTube, but I get to talk to the YouTube video.
You've been to this
because this is the exact
before.
set. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's very cool.
And so when I launched the YouTube channel, I just started thinking in terms of years, not weeks and months. So it's not that the YouTube channel doesn't make me money now. The thing I love about long form content, for example, is if you have it on a platform like YouTube, it's really bingeable, right? So someone's ability to go from one video to the next is so much easier than say a platform like Instagram or Instagram or Facebook. And so I've made a lot of money from my small YouTube channel, right? In the last few months. Like I've had clients follow me on Facebook, go to my YouTube channel, binge all of that, and then reach out and work with me. I've had people find me on YouTube, watch all the YouTube channel, not be connected with me anywhere else, and work with me. But the pressure has come off where I'm no longer creating content to just get an ROI today. I'm working on building brand and audience for the years to come. And so it's been such a cool iteration for me, but it all came from the decision of utilizing content and really realizing its power. And I will never forget hearing Hormozi talk about this. There's a powerful reframe for me. He said he was never interested in content because he thought the content was the asset, but the asset is the audience the content builds. It's the trust you build with a group of people that makes content so powerful. It's not about the 15-minute video you create and then thinking that's the most important piece. It's the people who watch it who now want to watch more of your stuff because there was so much value in that 15 minutes. And when I realized that shift, it became such a powerful moment of going, man, I need to go all in on this content thing because of the power of having an audience that's engaged.
You know what I'm noticing the pattern, and you probably have seen this yourself, but I noticed what happened was every time you had an iteration earlier on, it was like an identity shift. You are a pastor, you are a drug addict, you are an entrepreneur, and you see somebody who's a role model and you kind of try to put on their clothes, right? Like you try to become them, put on the Batman costume. Right now, what I'm seeing the difference is like Hormozi, you don't want to be him, but his philosophy around content creation, you want to borrow that. And, social media marketing, like I know it's a bit dated, but Tai Lopez, you don't want to be Tai, but you can use what he gave. It's more like a cafeteria situation where you pick the best parts of people, right?
Yeah.
There are people like Elon, for example, where I would never in a million years want his life, but a little bit of his creative genius, absolutely, right? And I think that when we separate people's gifts with their personality, then we don't lose ourselves. And did you find yourself distinctively making a decision or a shift to, instead of try to become someone, to just take and learn 100%. From them?
Yeah.
Was that
okay, I remember hearing a mentor say years ago, first we imitate, then we emulate, and then we innovate. And too many people I see, they come into this space and they try and get really creative and innovative really fast. And so they try and go to the opposite of what's working or the opposite of what people are saying in order to try and be different, right? And so that doesn't really work, right? It's like we want to take what's working and we model it, right? The problem for most people though is they never iterate to make it their own. So what they're doing is they're going through a Sam Ovens course, or they're working with Taki or Hormozi or any of these amazing coaches, and all they're doing is copying and pasting. And copying and pasting can totally work if then the idea is run with the model and then make it your own. But what happens for a lot of people is they're taking someone else's model with different goals, with different personalities, with different skills. Like taking advice from a billionaire should come with a huge grain of salt, which is they have a radically different goal than you do, and they're going to have to make different sacrifices along the way to get to that goal. And so when you align yourself with someone who has a different goal and wants a different life for themselves, you have to take it with the grain of salt of, this might work for them, let me find out how it'll work for me. And so I was listening to Dan Martell recently, and he had this amazing vlog, and he introduced this idea of becoming a belief collector. Right? So like identifying people's thinking that you really love and then pulling it in and going like, that's so good, I'm going to bring that into my thinking. I need to think more like that. For me, I've done that with business models and with the ways that people run their businesses. So like someone who's been really influential for me, but I've never worked with personally, is a coach called Brooke Castillo. So she did 52 million last year in the life coaching space. Many coaches don't even know who she is because she's just like got such a radically different model to most of us. And so I've taken so much of her thinking and so much of the way that she does things and brought them into my business. And so all I'm doing is like compiling the best of. I'm becoming a belief collector. I'm becoming a model collector. Finding things that I really like about other people's business models and then kind of bringing them in to make Dan's version of this and building it around my life. So it's a reflection of my goals, not just an inheritance of someone else's goals and someone else's model, right? It's discovering my own sung superpower as opposed to putting on Batman's costume and trying to pretend to be him.
Yeah, love it. Two things I want to cover before we talk about everything else I'm curious about, all the shiny objects. Two things is, what is the actual like service delivery or the coaching program look like? How does that work, like the format? Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is, what's your content creation strategy right now? How do you find the ideas, execute on shooting it, like if it's batching or when you feel like it, and where does it go out to? So there's two questions, you can answer them.
No, that's great.
You like.
Yeah, so let's talk about the model. So when it comes to coaching, there's kind of two main models, right? And we can overcomplicate it because there's like, you can add calls, take away calls, add content, take away content, but there's really scalable and intimate. And scalable requires less of you or a team, and it's more leveraged in nature. So you're going to utilize things like community, live events, virtual events, content to deliver the result that people are buying into. And so one of my offers is called The Community, and it has one call from me a week, and then I do a bunch of bonus calls and things like that, but there's no one-to-one time associated with that with me or with anyone else. And so what that's done is it's forced me to create a really good collaborative community where people are paying $18,000 a year to be in this space where there's no one-to-one coaching, so we're teaching them to become self-led. And then on the other side, I have an intimate offer. And the intimate offer is more of my time, where you're getting my advisory, my mentorship, and my coaching. And so one of the things I'm always looking at when it comes to business models is the season of the entrepreneur and kind of what their goals are for the season, because depending on that, you want to lean towards more of an intimate model where you can make a lot of money. Like, I find this funny, right? People say like we shouldn't do one-to-one coaching, right? It's like it's beneath us at a certain point. Oh goodness, I'm going from one to one to one to many. Dude, I had one client last year, pay me $300,000 just for consulting at $2,500 an hour. So oftentimes it's not about whether or not the one-to-one coaching should be done or not, as if it's black or white. It's how much is our time worth, right? Because one-to-one coaching is a really poor trade time for money if it's a lot of time for a little bit of money. And it's a fantastic way to make a lot of money if the trade is great. And so that was one of the things that I found so interesting is I've kind of made a resurgence within my business and with clients, moving them towards one-to-one coaching, but structuring it in a way where it's an amazing hourly rate. So intimate versus scalable is kind of how I think about it and how I've designed my business. When it comes to content, I think about it in a couple of ways. Firstly, I don't know who I heard this from, but the hub and spoke model. One of the mistakes a lot of people make when it comes to content is they look at the greats and they try to emulate them from day one. So you imagine you're starting out your content journey and you listen to Gary Vee and he says you should be posting on every platform all the time, all the stuff. And what I didn't realize at the time was the hardest thing to manage as an entrepreneur is your energy, not necessarily your time, right? So you can figure out how to put all these 15-minute increments in your calendar of like getting stuff done, but what will burn out faster than time is your energy. And creating and distributing content requires a lot of energy. And so oftentimes people are much better positioned if they focus on one platform. And that's what we call the hub. So the hub for us is like, we call it a community funnel. Could be Facebook, could be Instagram, could be LinkedIn. It is your hub of where you're building community. And that's where all of your content is created for. Then the spokes are where we redistribute it. So we went recently from 10 pieces of content a week to 60 pieces of content. But that wasn't me creating 60 individual pieces of content. That was us upping our redistribution. And so everything for me is based around YouTube content. So I'll shoot 2 to 3 videos a week. Some of them will be direct to camera covering a topic. Some of them will be like meetings that I'm in, kind of trying to document more than creating. And then redistributing that across reels. So doing like 2 reels a day, like we're ramping up to that right now. And then redistributing them across Instagram, YouTube, Threads, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and then bringing in the necessary copywriting that's going to support those things. But everything for me flows out of long form video content, because the more I've positioned myself and focus my energy on creating long form content, the easier it is to get clients. So I mentioned earlier how I close clients in the DMs, right? And I had a belief when I was selling the $1,000 thing back in 2019 that worked for that price point, but it wouldn't work for a higher price point. What I've realized is it's not so much about what price it works for and doesn't work for. It's how much trust you've built and how much your marketing has pre-sold your prospects on you being the solution for them. So now I sell $18,000 and kind of $20,000 packages through chat every day, but it's because I've focused so much on building trust through long form content. I don't know if that answers your questions, if there's any follow-ups, but that's kind of the kind of 2 things that come to mind for me.
I got a couple follow-ups. One of them is, you mentioned earlier, you're a really tight team of just 2. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think that you'd be able to edit and repurpose and distribute all that with 2 people. Do you have contractors, or how does that work?
Yeah, so that's a great question.
And maybe I think this is good for the listeners. Like they're thinking about bringing and building a team versus contractors versus DIY. Yep. What's your approach to that?
So I have 2 team members. I have a mostly full-time virtual assistant. She is amazing. She does all the administration. She does all the legwork of the redistribution and things like that. She's my superstar right hand. Then I brought on a full-time content manager who oversees all of the strategy, redistribution, all of the editing, doesn't necessarily do it all, but oversees all of that and then shoots all of this content. So literally, he's actually here right now with the camera, right? So he's filming this, right? So he's
just off camera right now.
Just off camera. He's like boots on the ground with me here in Bali shooting stuff. So we go
Say hi to him for me, because I used to be him. That's how I started as a videographer.
I'll tell him you say hi. So those are the two main team members, right? I don't have any salespeople. I don't have any coaches or anything like that. And then we do work with a couple of different agencies that we contract out stuff to. But this has been something that is really, really new. Like have a full-on content team or all of these things to get to 7 figures. This is like, once I've kind of got to this kind of $1 million profit thing, I've now started building out this team of vendors, so to speak. So I have someone that repurposes my transcriptions from videos into copy to promote the videos. So they'll take the transcription of the video, write the YouTube description, write the post for Facebook to promote it. And then I have a video editing agency. I was working with just one contractor and found that we kind of outgrew him pretty fast, and there was like language barriers and things like that. So we've recently just taken on an agency that helps with short form, and then in a couple of weeks they're going to be helping us with long form. But up until now, most of it has kind of been quote unquote in-house. Like my first few YouTube videos was phone, these headphones, and me just uploading it myself. Like there was no tech, there was no editing. It was literally just getting it done. And so that's been a huge belief that served me well, is imperfect action, right? Like I love bringing up Hormozi again. If you look at his old YouTube videos, it is hilarious how bad the production is. Like it's the worst webcam, a dimly lit room, there's nothing in his background. There's no hue lights or plants. I think in some of his videos, there's a whiteboard and there's an American flag and it's him in his tank top, just sitting there on a Facebook Live, kind of sharing some stuff. And so for me, it's always been about the emphasis of like what I'm saying, not how it looks. And then if you can move towards making it look better and sound better, that's amazing. But don't let that be a barrier to you actually taking action, right? Like I love, we look at someone like Ty Lopez, who's made tens of millions of videos shot from his phone with no mic. He's just holding it and he's here in my garage, right? That was one of the best YouTube ads of all time. And it was shot on a whim with his phone, with no team, with no production quality, with no editing whatsoever. So that's how I've kind of built my team, and how I started was I just got started with what I had, the gear I had, the team I had, which was no team. And then I've slowly started to build this out as I've got clearer on the vision of what I'm trying to do with content. And over the next 12 months, like my goal is to kind of assemble the Avengers of content, like in terms of like really creating amazing content on every platform and me doing as little work as possible. Meaning like I want to do high leverage video stuff, do short form, do long form. I don't really want to be sitting down and creating articles, doing editing, figuring out the scheduling times and the distribution. I want the team to be able to do that for me. I want to, as much as I heard Ty Lopez say the other day, the best business model is live your life and have people film it. And I was like, yep, that sounds about right for me. And so for me, it's like just before this call, I did a one-to-one coaching call and the camera was there and we filmed the thing. So that 30-minute call might become a 10-minute video. And so those are the kind of things I'm thinking about with content, is not just how do I create content, but how do I document what I'm already doing.
Got it. Okay, couple of lightning round questions before we wrap this up. And the thing I was going to ask was like, what are you thinking about in the future? And you just covered that for me, so thank you for that.
Perfect.
Lightning round questions. 5 books that have helped you the most.
Yeah, so a couple that come to mind right away is Man's Search for Meaning is a fantastic book. I've read that multiple times.
We'll link these below.
I read that again in the middle of COVID. COVID for me was a really interesting thing because we were about to leave the country in 2020 and I was so ready to get out of New Zealand. New Zealand is where I was born, but it's not my home, you know? And so I remember just feeling so powerless and victimized by the fact that, for anyone who doesn't know, New Zealand during the lockdowns and things like that, you could leave, but you couldn't get back in, right? So you had to go on this crazy lottery where we had people that were locked out of the country for a year, right? And so that for me was a really like my mindset started to suck. And so Man's Search for Meaning was incredible. Second book, which is a mouthful, is called Psycho-Cybernetics. Amazing, amazing book on the psychology of self-image. So I would say like anyone who's trying to improve their thought life, their identity, become a better belief collector, I would say that's a great place to start. $100 Million Offers is an amazing book, of course, right? And so highly recommend that for anyone who's in business and looking to create better offers. I think that's fantastic. Looking at my books right now. Yeah, goodness, 4-Hour Workweek. I'm always floored at how great that book is. You just revisit it no matter the stage of business you're at, and it's just such a great read. And so highly recommend you thinking about that. Building a Story Brand is another one by Donald Miller. That's a fantastic book. I don't know if any others come to mind.
We got 5. That was great.
Perfect.
That was great. Thank you. And I like to do these unprepared because it's the top of mind ones that are usually the ones that not the famous ones. Actually, you said a few that were really famous and a couple I haven't read yet. So
Yeah.
I put them on
Man's
my
Search for
list
Meaning
just
and Psycho-Cybernetics are for sure top books for me. Like those would be, you would ask me on any day of the week in any year, and those would be the books that I recommend. They're amazing.
Got it. Final question. Podcasts that you love right now that you listen to, if any.
Great question. So I would say there's not many that I listen to frequently, but I have a number that I kind of dip in and out of. So I mentioned Brooke Castillo earlier. She has a fantastic podcast called the Life Coach School Podcast. That's a really, really good podcast. Occasionally, depending on the guests, I'll listen to Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO, or Jay Shetty. So if they've got really interesting people, like I loved Jay Shetty's interview with Rick Rubin. For any of you who don't know Rick Rubin, he's one of the greatest music producers of all time. In fact, one of my favorite books is a book that he wrote called The Creative Act. So highly recommend that. Yeah, I love Hormozi's podcast. I really like Hormozi's early episodes as well. Like now, obviously, he's speaking to a very different audience to kind of how he started out. If you go through the first 100 episodes of Hormozi's podcast, it's a masterclass in business building. I highly recommend checking that out.
Awesome. Have you checked out this one called How to Take Over the World?
No, I haven't.
I'd recommend that if you haven't. What this guy does is he just looks at the biographies of successful people who've taken over the world in some way, either through science, through conquest, through business and things like that. And he reads a whole bunch of biographies and distills it down to either one episode in 1 hour or two in 2 hours.
Oh, amazing!
I'd love that one. And there's one called Founders, which is a similar theme, but specifically in the entrepreneurial space.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but sometimes just hearing a story is so much more fun than than doing theory. So you mix that up. So those 100%. Could be fun. I don't know. Maybe you should check those out.
Yeah, I will.
All right, I gotta let you go.
Appreciate your time.
But if you have one, thank you so much. I appreciate yours. One final thing. If you have any words of wisdom for people who are thinking about balancing content creation and business, or like shouldn't they? There must be your clients who ask a question. What do you say to them when they ask, like, I'm struggling with content creation? What should I be focusing on? What should I start with? What should my path be?
Couple of key things come to mind. Firstly, Gary Vee's Document, Don't Create is a amazing place to start. It's oftentimes we think we need to sit down and create content rather than realizing we're already doing a bunch of stuff that could be considered content if we simply filmed it and redistributed it, right? The second thing is, I have yet to actually sit down and brainstorm video ideas, right? So I don't try and come up with the best topic. I live my life. I hear problems that clients have. I hear questions that prospects have. And I go through my life with my antennae up, right? Trying to pick up the signal of like what might be something that I'm excited to talk about. So I've yet to create a video that I don't want to create simply for the sake of creation. I'm always creating stuff I want to talk about. And so really going from that sense of what makes a great piece of content versus what questions would I like to answer and what topics would I like to talk about, I think is a really key piece. The third thing I'd say is start with what you can commit to doing consistently. So some people go, I'm creating no content, so I'm going to create 3 podcast episodes a week. Why don't you just start with 1 a week and just figure that out, right? Start with something you can actually commit to long term, so you're not bouncing back and forth between consistency and non-consistency, between momentum and not, but find something that you were excited to do and find a medium you're excited to do it in. Like, I think this medium is perfect for some people. And so if they love the idea of sitting down with fascinating people and asking questions and basically creating content out of conversations like this, they should do that. For other people, they don't want to do that. So they should sit down and do book reviews or do breaking down courses they've been through, whatever it is. Finding the element that aligns with your passions and your greatest excitement is a really big hack. Because in order for it to be sustainable, it has to be enjoyable. And the last thing I'd say is the hack for me has been you have to manage energy, not time. So what parts of the day, what pockets of the week are going to be best for you to create content? So Wednesday for me is content creation day. I don't create content on any other day of the week. I shot 13 videos between longs and shorts on Wednesday, and that's me for the next couple of weeks, right? And so I don't think about content every day. I'm not trying to carve out 10 minutes here and 15 minutes here. I manage my energy. So I come into a Wednesday and that is all I'm thinking about. That's the only energy I need to bring. I'm not coaching and then creating and then coaching and then creating. I'm just doing one thing at a time. Fridays and Tuesdays are my call days. So that's where I'm doing stuff like this. And so really figuring out how to manage your energy and not your time for the greatest creative output, I think is a huge hack for people to think about. Because I think they try and create from a place of stress and scarcity. I've got 30 minutes here and I need to create an amazing YouTube thing and I'm going to 10 calls after that. I don't think that's how it works for most people. I think we need to create space and carve out time and batch stuff so we can manage our energy the best we can.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. So I've got to wrap this up. I want to respect your time. And to the listeners, guys, what I want to say is the fact that you came all the way to the end, whether you're watching this on YouTube, whether you're listening in Spotify or Apple Podcasts, something about Dan and his story kept you to the end. So what I want you to do is please share this with somebody else. And whoever it is who's thinking about content creation, different path in life, or radical change potentially in life, then I think that this would be a good fit for them. Share this with somebody, do them a favor. And I think his story is entertaining as hell as well. Dan, thanks so much for being on the show. I appreciate you. And for everybody else, I'll see you again next week.
Thanks, dude.